Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Happy Monday. Ben Anderson rolling solo today. Win big this Wednesday on the KSL Sports Zone with Win Tickets Wednesday. This week, win tickets to see Brian Regan at the Delta Center on Saturday, February 14th. That's this Saturday. That's Valentine's Day. Take your date to go see Brian Regan. Get your tickets today, SeatGeek.com. That's SeatGeek.com. Or listen Wednesday for your chance to win. All right, let's welcome in our next guest. You can find him on Twitter at CBB_Central. You can read his work in Sports Illustrated. It's Kevin Sweeney. What's going on, Kevin?
What's going on, man? Good to catch up.
So big Saturday. It feels like we're kind of getting to the point now where the college basketball season's garnering a lot of attention. I know it's your life, so I'm not trying to insult you by saying that. But the Super Bowl's over. NBA is about to go into the All-Star break. We're getting some great in-conference matchups, including a lot of run for BYU. They've played 5 really tough teams in their last 6 games, and they are 1-5 in those. What have you seen from BYU over this stretch?
Yeah, I mean, look, with the way the Big 12 is and how strong it is at the top, you know, there's going to be a stretch in your year where you just feel like you can't catch a break, and that's what BYU is feeling right now, I'm sure. Look, I think their defense has been of real concern over the last 5-6 games. They have to be better on that end of the floor. I think their lack of size in the backcourt with Wright and Saunders, who's not a great athlete, obviously. I think that has hurt them at times. I think some of the role players that they were maybe counting on, they've been hurt with injuries and whatnot in addition to that, but just hasn't really come together with some of the moves at the margins that I think Kevin Young hoped to make last spring. I still think they're a very good basketball team, but they've got some things to work on and obviously starting faster, chief among them. And when you face this type of schedule that they've been on the last 2-3 weeks, it can get uglier than it maybe should look in a short period of time.
Now, they only allow 77 points to Houston, but that's because Houston, we know how they like to play. It's a meat grinder. They just want to slow it down and kill you, and 77-66 is right in their wheelhouse. But you're right. You look at their last few games, Kevin, they gave up 99 points to Oklahoma State. They gave up 90 points to Kansas, 86 points to Arizona, 84 points to Texas Tech. And most of these games are pretty close, but if you're not getting stops late, it doesn't matter how good AJ Dybantsa or Rob Wright or Richie Saunders is. It just doesn't seem like they're even giving them a chance really to win these games, even with like some heroic comebacks.
Right, and this isn't as simple as people are making an unsustainable rate of threes or anything against them. That is what happens, I think, sometimes in these short spans as you look up and it's like, teams are shooting 45% from three against BYU for the last week. Like that's not what's happening here. Like they're getting killed at the rim. People have been able to drive them and score at the basket. I mean, yeah, you said Houston scored 77. They scored 1.3 points per possession in that game. That's elite. That's as good as you can be offensively pretty much over a full game. So, it's been a huge problem. They just haven't been able to get stops. Obviously the schedule lightens up this week, maybe an opportunity to get back on the horse a little bit. But it's been tough sledding, no question.
You mentioned, the defense with Richie Saunders and Rob Wright, and they're just small. Richie Saunders is just not going to be a great defensive player, period. I've been a little underwhelmed with AJ Dybantsa on that side of the floor, and I want to talk about how great AJ has been otherwise and kind of some of his draft stock stuff with you later, but he gets straight line drived a lot. I mean, guys take him off the dribble, and they seem like they can beat him, or a simple screen, he just doesn't get skinny and doesn't get over it or doesn't get under it. It does seem like there's an issue on that side of the floor. Is that skill? Is that focus? Is that care? What have you seen on that end?
I think it's probably more the latter. I think, look, he gets held to a really high standard defensively because the best moments for him are unbelievable. Like I think about the Clemson game in the second half. He, as good as he was offensively, he completely dominated the game defensively. And scouts have seen that dating back to high school and playing with USA Basketball. Like they know what the ceiling is on that end of the floor. And so when there are nights where it feels like he's maybe going through the motions a little bit on that end, that's really frustrating. And look, I understand that he's playing a ton of minutes right now. I mean, you're playing 35 minutes a night in high physicality games. You don't have a ton of rest. Like all those things play into it. He's so involved in their offensive game plan, and there's definitely a wear and tear factor that's probably contributing to this. But I think you're right that if BYU wants to get where it needs to go, it needs the best of AJ Dybantsa, and not just offensively, but defensively as well.
So looking at BYU overall, because, they're losing to great teams. I mean, Houston is great. Arizona's great. Texas Tech is very good. Kansas, we know, is very good. Is this cause for concern? I mean, are they putting a ceiling on themselves and their ability to make a truly deep run? Because you get to the Elite Eight, you're playing great teams. Even the Sweet 16, you're playing top 20 teams most games in the tournament. Is that going to be BYU's ceiling this year, or can they still reach those highest highs?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're a comeback, really a ridiculous comeback against Clemson away from their only top 30 win being Villanova, who's like an 8 or a 9 seed right now. Like they have not lived up to the expectations in these high level games, and I think that's a huge concern if you're talking about ceiling. I think part of that's defense. And when you think about teams that make Final Fours, they're usually top 20 to 30 nationally on that end of the floor. BYU's just inside the top 50 at 49 as of this morning on KenPom. So, yeah, look, I think it puts a huge ceiling on them. Individually in any given game, I think because of the star power at the top of this roster, they can beat anyone in the country. But when you're talking about stacking performances and making a Final Four, achieving the types of things that you hope to achieve in a once-in-a-generation type of year, they look a ways away from that at this point.
So looking at BYU and where they are in this model that they've had, which we know this roster cost a fortune, and AJ is probably one of, if not the highest paid player in college basketball this year. Robert Wright obviously cost a lot of money to transfer up as well. Is it? They're not Rutgers from last season, which was a nearly unmitigated disaster. As good as Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are, the rest of the roster was just a joke. But BYU has somewhat similar issues where the depth on the roster, as you mentioned, is just not there. They're just not very deep. It's why they fall behind at times. They just start slow with their starters. They just don't seem to have those role players that really step up when they need to, which is a surprise because they have had some of those players in recent seasons. That's kind of the expectation. Is it just that simple where they're too overloaded at the top and don't have the other guys?
Yeah, look, and I think Kevin Young's NBA background probably contributes to this a little bit, right? Where, when you build an NBA roster for the most part, so much of your cap space is occupied by the top 2, 3, 4 guys on the roster, and you're kind of finding minimum guys to fill out. And I think teams want to try to replicate that in college, but it's really hard to do because of the way that the market is, and quite frankly, because the gap in level between a minimum NBA player and a minimum college player is substantial, right? It's drastic. So, I think you think about the portal guys, with Maroos and Pickens and guys like that just didn't quite come together. And then injuries obviously contributing to that. Baker gets hurt. That's another piece. Like, they were always going to be sort of walking on a bit of a tightrope depth-wise. And, the guys that maybe they bet on have not panned out the way that they had hoped. And so I think that's a learning for the future in terms of maybe the roster build and what it looks like going forward. Do you spend a little bit more on the bench? Do you find more proven guys? But I also think at the end of the day, like, if you could go do the AJ contract again, you'd do it 10 times out of 10. He's been everything you could hope for and more. So, win at the margins as much as anything. Yeah,
I think that's the really interesting next step for BYU, which is the money's not drying up. The donor base is there. The interest in sports is there. So I think they can always go and be competitive for these top guys if they want to. I just honestly wonder, and as you've looked around college basketball, you have a better understanding of this certainly than anyone in the state, I would say right now, is how successful is that historically if you don't also have everything else? Like, Arizona has Koa Pete, probably going to be a top 10 pick. We'll see what it ends up looking like by the end of the season. But they are so good everywhere. They have that depth, and it seems like that's why they're better than everybody else. Yeah, look, I think there's different ways to win. And I think the formula of let's go be in the mix with some of the best players in the country is not a bad one, right? Like, there's very few times I would tell you if you can get one of the 10 best players in the sport not to take it. Like, you would have to really derail your whole payroll and cap as we think about these things very much in a pro mindset. Look, I think I don't know that there's necessarily like this was not the right way to build it as much as it was maybe like we picked the wrong pieces at the margins. If I was doing the post-mortem and it's early for that's probably where my takeaway would be. I would have to more in-depthly scout it and go through, but
in my estimation, I'd say this has been more a bad luck / bad choices than maybe bad roster construction.
Is Kansas a true contender to win it all if Darryn Peterson can play both halves of a basketball game and play the entire tournament?
Man, I mean, I think they're close. Probably not tier 1 for me, but in that tier 2 group, Darryn can obviously change a game. They're just so tough. I mean, Council is a monster, just flies around. Badunga's an elite defender. Trey White's really emerged. I think what Tiller brought them in the BYU game in particular was massive. He's been inconsistent. The lack of pieces outside of that core 4 is probably what holds me back. But it's hard to bet against them, certainly on their home court, but they've shown some real teeth on the road as well of late.
So looking at Duke then, who also suffered a loss over the weekend, they lose North Carolina in one of the best games of the season, if not the best game of the college basketball season so far. Where do you place them? And the reason I'm asking is because, we're talking about AJ, we're talking about Darryn Peterson, we're talking about Cam Boozer. Those were the 3 guys this year. Are they lifting their teams to being elite, top-tier teams that are serious threats to go to the Final Four and win it all?
Yeah, look, I think all have lived up to what you would have hoped, right? I mean, AJ was good enough to be the best player on a Final Four team, and has proven that. Again, we'll see where BYU ends up in comparison to, 2 maybe traditional blue bloods like Duke and Kansas that have a little easier time filling out the rest of their roster than BYU does, even in this financial age. But look, that's been the question for all 3, is what does the roster look like below them? And I think for Kansas, some of those questions have been answered relatively recently. I think for Duke, Gangba and Evans, 2 of their sophomores, have been really good. Both struggled, though, against Carolina, and I think that's why you saw them not be able to finish late in that game. And then for BYU, I think you thought you had those answers to the test in January, and all of a sudden, these last couple of weeks come around, and it's been bumpy. So I think you can. It would be maybe the overarching answer, but you need to find a way to build out a nice nucleus around them, and you're going to be taking risks on those guys. They can't be, and not everybody can be paid like the best player.
Kevin, you brought up interesting and leaping off of that, being paid like the best player. The guys down the roster, guys 7, 8, 9, maybe even 6, 7, 8, which is where BYU seems to be lacking, and maybe Arizona is great, or Kentucky, or Kentucky's a bad example this year. Kansas or Duke might have an advantage. Do you think lesser paid or even non-paid players are picking some of those blue bloods that still have that name because of the reputation? Like, do you see that, or are guys who are good enough to be 6, 7, or 8 at Duke or Kansas, are they going places where they can get more money?
So I think out of high school, the brand still matters substantially, right? And I think that's the best way to build depth for those blue bloods, is landing these guys out of high school, and essentially before they realize they're not starters, then they're youthful role players until they transfer out to try to be a dude, right? I think in the portal, it's really hard to, if you're a big wing, right, and you see, hey, they have Cam Boozer and Isaiah Evans on their roster, like, the writing's on the wall for me. I'm probably coming off the bench. And some guys, it will resonate with them to be a role player on a good team, especially if it's like their last year, what have you. They just want to be a part of like the Duke experience, but that's not for everybody, right? And I think the same thing, you'll run into that at a BYU or really anywhere else. Like the biggest currency of the portal is not money, it's playing time. And so if you can't offer that, if you can't offer shots, and BYU really couldn't offer any shots to anyone in the portal, it does get harder to find the right guys, and you really have to find guys that resonate with the concept of playing at BYU, playing with other great players, having a chance to go deep in March, things like that. And that's not everybody in the portal. It's certainly some guys, but it narrows your pool.
All right, Kevin, the other big way BYU can still have a very successful season is AJ Dybantsa getting drafted very high, and that is going to happen barring something absolutely ludicrous happening before now and June. So are you confident saying we know who the top 3 guys in the draft are, and then are you confident that you know which order they would go in today?
Not confident in the order. Not 100% confident that Boozer is 3. Pretty darn confident that Darryn and AJ are 1 and 2. And if either of them fell past 2, they would certainly not fall past 3.
Who do you think is number 1 right now?
I have Darryn ahead of AJ as of now. My main justification is when I think about building an NBA offense around my number 1 pick, I see the way that Darryn plays, the dynamic off-dribble shooting, the ability to be a true, three-level scorer. I think AJ still has a lot to prove as a shooter. And, I just think he's a little more polished right now offensively. But it's certainly close. But at its core, to me, that's the real argument is how would you want to build your offense? And it may depend on the person on your roster, whoever gets that number one pick, who fits better into it. But if I was starting from scratch, I think Darryn makes a little more sense to build around in the modern NBA.
I'm sure you've answered this question 1,000 times and will again before June, but do we have any sense of why he plays so rarely? I mean, I know there's the cramping issue and it goes back to AAU, but does he not care? Are there concerns about it? Is it a red flag, or how are teams viewing it?
I think NBA teams are more concerned that there would be something medically wrong than that he doesn't compete or want to compete. The intel from him dating back to early in high school is that this dude is ferociously competitive. And quite frankly, if you wanted to shut it down right now, he could shut it down and potentially be the number one pick. So there's no incentive for him to play other than being super competitive. I think, teams are anxious to see what comes of the medicals at the combine in May. See if there's maybe a underlying cause of why he's dealing with, these cramps and muscle spasms and things of that nature. But overall, I would say the concern level is not that high. I wonder if that changes as, owners get involved in these decisions and not just scouts and GMs who are invested in this purely from a talent standpoint, and owners who have to build their organization and sell tickets, things like that, if that weighs in at all. But I don't think that the cramping is enough to knock him off the one line at the moment.
Are teams going to try and make him a point guard or a shooting guard in the NBA? I mean, he's a combo guard, obviously. He can do both, but do you think he has a primary position?
I think he'll be on the ball more in the NBA. I think Kansas realized early that when they put him on the ball, it ruined their spacing because of the way teams would guard him and the way the teams didn't respect the shooting of the rest of Kansas's roster. And so it made more sense to put Council on the ball and let Peterson run off of actions. I think in the NBA, you'll see him more on the ball. Maybe it's more of a combo, as you said, again, Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, guys who can play with or without it. Those are comps you hear quite regularly. But I think he can be a full-time point guard, especially if you surround him with other guys who have high IQ and can shoot.
Who could displace Boozer as the third guy in this draft?
I think some teams may be intrigued by these ultra-fast rising guards, Keaton Wagler at Illinois and Kingston Flemings, who was phenomenal for Houston on Saturday and has been really for all season long. I think certain teams question sort of the athleticism, the overall upside with Cam. I think the productivity is going to get to a point where it's just hard to say no. But it wouldn't shock me if one of those two guys or Caleb Wilson, who was phenomenal against Duke just on Saturday. I think those guys could at least make it a conversation.
Kevin, great stuff. Thanks for jumping on. We'll catch up with you again before the tournament.
Thanks, fellas.
There he is, Kevin Sweeney, giving us a breakdown. Find him on Twitter at CBB_Central. You can read him at Sports Illustrated. You can also catch his podcast at Basket Review. Really good stuff from Kevin there. Fascinating what's going on with BYU. This doesn't have to be a wasted season. I guess the insurance of having a guy who's going to go number 1 or number 2 overall, you can always wear that. You can always say that that's a trophy you can put in your trophy case the same way, Andrew Bogut made a Sweet 16, and that's successful and a good run for Utah there. And he's a number 1 overall pick, and you can always have that and celebrate that and say that's a part of your program's history. And BYU obviously hasn't had that in nearly 40 years since Sean Bradley was the number 2 overall pick. So having a guy that's going to go in the top 2 or 3 is something to hang your hat on. Not winning more is going to be difficult to understand if BYU's not able to get this done in the tournament. And the nice thing about college basketball, the regular season matters. It helps to certainly get your seeding up, and these are games you play early in the season, or I should say early in the tournament, allow you to make a deeper run. But it's about how you play in March. It's not necessarily about how you play in February. So BYU's got a couple of weeks to get this sorted out, see how they play in the Big 12 tournament, see what type of a seeding they can get, and then try and make a run. And if you can make a run and then have a top 2 pick, it ends up being the year that I think a lot of people invested in, both emotionally and financially. If you only get one or the other, right now it looks like you're getting the high draft pick and maybe not a deep run. And I'll be curious how BYU responds to that. Are you going to change the model with how you build? I think Kevin's right. If you can get a top 5 player in the league, or not just in the league, but in all of college basketball, you have to take that opportunity every chance you get. So we'll see. Good stuff from Kevin there. If you missed any of our interviews, you can go check them out on our podcast page. Anywhere you get your podcast, just search Jake and Ben or go to KSLSports.com. All right, when we come back, we'll talk more about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s debut for the Utah Jazz, what we saw, what we didn't see. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.